Coming up next, it was a song unlike anything he'd ever done before. A complete departure from the rough edges and restless spirit that made him the voice of a generation. With this track, one of the most influential musical icons didn't just change his sound, he flipped the script on what fans thought they knew about him. But here's the kicker. If it were solely up to him, the song, it wouldn't have been released at all. He actually begged and pleaded with the label not to put it out. So what's the real story behind the song that became one of his most unforgettable? Was it about a mystery woman, or was it really meant for a public figure that shocked everyone years later in an interview when he finally shared it? It probably missed number one because of a misunderstanding that the song was dirty, and it wasn't. And the vocal was sped up, making the icon unrecognizable. Plus a famous janitor helped play the drums. Great story coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey Music Junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember playing laser tag around the house back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the white or red button, click the bell so you never miss an episode or an interview. Remember to go vote on who the greatest rock band of all time is. We'll be doing a daily head-to-head poll at professorofrock.com. It's going to be cool. For the next few weeks, we're going to set the seating for the bracket, so make sure to go vote. Today's head-to-head matchup is AC/DC versus the Smiths. Go to professorofrock.com to make your pick. Now, sometimes an artist can release a song that shocks the world, and in fact, it doesn't sound anything like the artist or their style. When Bob Dylan dropped Nashville Skyline, it wasn't just a shift. I mean, it was a curveball. Fans already watched him evolve beyond the raw folk sound that made him the voice of a generation earlier. But this time, Dylan wasn't just changing styles, he was leaving that voice behind entirely. Gone were the gravelly edges, the nasally twang, and the raw urgency of his earlier work. Instead, he unveiled a new velvety smooth croon that felt intimate, almost disarming for the Dylan purist. The transformation hit its peak with today's song, Lay Lady Lay.
Lay Lady Lay.
In this song, Dylan's voice, now tender and unhurried, wrapped itself around the lyrics like a warm embrace. It was a far cry from the sharp-edged anthems that once defined him. Here, there were no protests, there were no fiery declarations, just a gentle, almost hypnotic invitation into a softer, more vulnerable world. That wasn't the Dylan people thought they knew, though. This was Dylan reimagined, offering something wholly unexpected, yet undeniably captivating for sure.
Lay across my big breast bed.
At the heart and soul of it all was the venerable Bob Dylan. His voice transformed into something that no one saw coming. It wasn't, like I said, the raw-edged drawl that had carried his earlier songs. It was softer, it was smoother, it was unrecognizable.
Stay, lady, stay.
Now, if you listen closely to John Wesley Harding, though, you can hear the shift beginning to take root.
He was never known to hurt an honest man.
A subtle evolution, but by the time Nashville Skyline rolled around, this change was undeniable. Bob Dylan himself credited his new sound to quitting cigarettes. There's also another reason, and we'll get to that later, but whatever the reason, it was a drastic departure that left fans both intrigued and surprised.
Stay with your man a while.
And when Bob Dylan was searching for the perfect song to showcase his bold new sound, Lay Lady Lay, it wasn't his first pick. In fact, he didn't see it as a strong contender at all. But Clive Davis, the savvy record executive, thought otherwise. Clive stepped in, urging Dylan to give the song a shot as a single. It was a big gamble, but it really paid off. But the story doesn't end there. The real intrigue lies in why Dylan wrote the song in the first place. A question shrouded in mystery, as so many things are with him. Now, true to form, Dylan's inspiration remains as elusive as ever, leaving fans to wonder what really sparked the creation of this timeless track.
Let me see you make 'em smile.
Now, when Bob Dylan wrote Lay Lady Lay, it was destined for something bigger than just an album cut, or so it seemed. The track was actually originally lined up to be the prominent theme for the Hollywood cult classic Midnight Cowboy that won Best Picture. Director John Schlesinger, He thought the song's tender, almost dreamy sentiment would create a fascinating contrast to the film's raw, unflinching story of two street hustlers, played by Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight, of course.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here! Don't worry about that, actually.
Now, Clinton Halen pointed out in Revolution in the Air, an incredible book about Dylan. I'll link to it below. You should read it. Pointed out that Lay Lady Lay didn't really fit the tone of Midnight Cowboy. In fact, he suggests that Bob might not have even read the script while he was working on the song. It's almost like he was writing in his own world, not fully tuned into the gritty, hard-edged story that the movie was trying to tell, and told well. In Midnight Cowboy, Joe Buck, played by Jon Voight, becomes a gigolo to get by in the big city. There's even a scene where he's in bed with a New York socialite. But let's be real, it's not exactly the kind of romantic vibe that you'd pair with Lay Lady Lay, at least not in my mind.
His clothes are dirty, but his hands are clean.
But there was one big problem. Bob wasn't in a hurry to get this song done. He has a well-known reputation for working at his own pace. So he meandered with the track, polishing and tweaking as only Bob Dylan could. Schlesinger, on the other hand, he had a production schedule to keep, and he couldn't wait for anyone, even a revered musician, a legend like Bob Dylan. When it became clear that Dylan wasn't going to deliver this song in time, the producer made a bold pivot. He swapped Dylan's Lay Lady Lay for Harry Nilsson's Everybody's Talkin'. We've talked about that before. A song that would go on to become iconic in its own right.
What you gotta do, cowboy? I'm scared.
While Lay Lady Lay missed out on its cinematic moment, on its close-up, if you will, it found its own way to shine, becoming a standout on Dylan's Nashville Skyline album. It's one of those what could have been moments in music history where a missed opportunity still turned into a classic.
Until the break of day.
Around this time, though, the discussion was happening about Bob's song being used in Midnight Cowboy. Bob actually presented the song to the Everly Brothers, which leads to an interesting subplot to the story of Lay Lady Lay. There was a rumor that the Everlys had rejected it because they misheard the lyrics. They misheard "lay across my big brass bed" as "lay across my big breast babe."
Lay across my big brass bed.
Actually, in a 1986 Rolling Stone interview, Don Everly recalled a fascinating brush with Bob Dylan in the late 60s. After the Everly Brothers performed in New York, Dylan played parts of Lay Lady Lay for them. He said, we were looking for songs. He was writing Lay Lady Lay at the time. And, speaking to the rumor of rejecting the song because of the lyrics being controversial, Don actually set the record straight, saying he sang parts of it and we weren't quite sure whether he was offering it to us or not. It was one of those awestruck moments. Later in the 1994 interview, Don elaborated, describing the encounter as informal and not really a business meeting per se, though the Everly Brothers did actually record the song, not in the 60s, but they put their own spin on it 15 years later on their, I believe it was their 1984 album, EB84. Bob Dylan is famously tight-lipped about the meaning behind his songs, of course, often leaving listeners to draw their own conclusions. He rarely defines his work, preferring the music to stand on its own. But in a rare moment, during a 1971 interview, Dylan revealed one intriguing detail about Lay Lady Lay. It was written for Barbra Streisand. That's all he said. No further explanation, no context. Was it meant for Streisand to perform, or was it simply a tribute to her immense talent as a singer? Bob has always left us guessing.
And you're the best thing that he's ever seen.
Dylan's lyric, "Whatever colors you have in your mind, I'll show them to you and you'll see them shine," that could be hinting at something deeper, especially with him asking the woman to lay across his big brass bed. It's almost like he's opening up to a world of emotions and experiences, sharing his vision with her.
Longer for the world to begin.
Bob keeps that feeling rolling, describing the simple yet powerful moments he craves. "I long to see you in the morning light. I long to reach for you in the night." In Lay Lady Lay, Bob comes across as surprisingly and beautifully romantic. No irony, no distance here. We may never know exactly who or what inspired the song, but it really doesn't matter. We can just be thankful that he wrote it.
See you in the morning light.
So back to Barbra Streisand, she actually shared a little gem with NBC News, saying, "I'm very flattered to find out that Bob Dylan wrote Lay Lady Lay for me. What I remember is getting flowers from him with a handwritten note asking me to sing a duet with him. But back then, I just couldn't imagine it." And then she says this, "Guess what, Bob? I can imagine it now."
I long to reach for you in the night.
So Bob Dylan and Barbra Streisand as a duet, I'm not sure it really works. I don't think the voices mesh, but of course it could be a Joe Cocker, Jennifer Warnes type of thing, and it could have been really cool. Who knows? It would be interesting. It's no wonder that this discovery made a lot of noise, but it's important to consider it within the bigger picture of Bob Dylan's character. He was known to forget songs that he'd written, sometimes not even recognizing them when other people performed them. It seems odd, but it's true.
Why wait any longer for the one you love?
Actually, Joan Baez has confirmed that trait, for example. In interviews, Bob often gave answers that seemed designed to throw people off, throw them off the scent. And even when he was being sincere, he had a habit of misstating details about his own life. Bob was never one to make things easy to pin down.
When he's standing in front of you.
Bob first played Lay Lady Lay to a group of esteemed songwriters. There was Joni Mitchell, Graham Nash, and Chris Christopherson at Johnny Cash's home outside of Nashville. Man, how cool would it have been to be a fly on the wall during that little get-together. Joni Mitchell, Graham Nash, Chris Christopherson, Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan. Amazing. Just sitting around, passing around a guitar, sharing songs, legendary. Not only is that a historic gathering of legends, it's also representing something that has been lost over decades of artistic isolation. In the 60s and 70s, there used to be a sense of community in places like Laurel Canyon and the Hollywood Hills and Haight-Ashbury in the Bay Area and the Lower East Side of Manhattan. There's a few examples. Where musicians could meet privately and enjoy each other and their creations with no judgment. That sense of camaraderie still exists in Nashville, but those fabled hangouts are extremely rare in the days of social media. It's crazy.
Lay, lady, lay.
During the recording sessions for Nashville Skyline, though, drummer Kenny Buttrey, he had a tough time figuring out the right drum part for the track. Bob suggested bongos, while producer Bob Johnston thought cowbells would be a good fit. Buttrey, not impressed with either suggestion, decided to use both to show them how bad those ideas were. Now get this, the late Chris Christopherson, who was working as a janitor at the studio at this time, he was roped into holding the bongos in one hand and the cowbell in the other. Buttrey moved the lone overhead drum mic over to these instruments, and then when he switched back to the drum set for the choruses, the drums sound distant because they weren't directly mic'd. The take you hear on the album is the first one that they did, and it ended up being one of Buttrey's favorite performances. So, the janitor helped play the drums, and then the janitor became famous in his own right. I mean, how cool is that? The recording of Lay Lady Lay was a fascinating assembly of established and emerging musicians. For example, playing that charming pedal steel guitar on that track was Pete Drake, who was one of the most in-demand backup musicians of the 60s. He played pedal steel on a number of iconic tracks, including Lynn Anderson's Rose Garden. There's also Charlie Rich's Behind Closed Doors. And then Bob Dylan's Lay Lady Lay and Tammy Wynette's Stand By Your Man. So some burners in there. His contributions earned him much-deserved recognition with inductions into the Musicians Hall of Fame and the Country Music Hall of Fame.
We get behind closed doors.
And then there's Charlie Daniels, known for his guitar and fiddle work. He was also a skilled session musician in Nashville early in his career, playing a variety of instruments. On Lay Lady Lay and other cuts on Nashville Skyline, Charlie played bass and guitar. Bob, he held Charlie in high regard, even writing in his 2004 memoir, Chronicles Volume 1, one of the best music books ever, in my top 5 for sure. He said when Charlie was around, something good would usually come out of the sessions.
You can have your cake and eat it too.
And of course, Bob Dylan himself played guitar, harmonica, keyboards, and delivered vocals on Lay Lady Lay, shaping the song's distinctive sound. Perhaps not surprisingly, with all that supreme musicianship, the first take of the song was the final version that became the big hit for Bob Dylan. So Lay Lady Lay climbed to number 8 in Canada, number 7 in New Zealand, number 5 in the UK, and number 7 here on the Billboard Hot 100. From a chart perspective, Lay Lady Lay is tied for third biggest in Bob's career as one of the most influential artists that ever lived. Like a Rolling Stone and Rainy Day Women, number 12 and 35, both climbed to number 2. Positively 4th Street also peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, so tied as far as that chart position goes.
Like a rolling stone, everybody must get stoned. You see me on the street.
But you know, it's very possible that Lay Lady Lay would have been Bob's only number 1 hit. It could have been a number 1 hit. There were quite a few radio stations who refused to play Lay Lady Lay because of the word lay in the title. They made a dumb assumption that the song was all about sex. It cost him airplay, serious airplay, and a higher charting. Now, Dylan has denied that the song was at all sexual. Even though it's grammatically incorrect, the song would be Lie, Lady, Lie. You know, that's rock and roll. Covers of Lay Lady Lay are all over the place. I mean, there's predictable ones like Peter, Paul, and Mary, Richie Havens, and the Byrds. You also have a very unique version by Duran Duran, kind of their Come Undone version. It sounds like Come Undone mixed with it.
Across my big grass bed.
And a trippy industrial interpretation by Al Jorgensen and Ministry. Cher also did it in 1969, but she changed it to Lay Baby Lay.
Lay, baby, lay.
For all its subsequent success, though, Bob Dylan was not a fan of this song. He said, "I never thought it was representative of anything I do." You know, he told this to Clive Davis, the president of Columbia Records. He criticized Lay Lady Lay as a, la 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 type of thing. Perhaps poking fun at Simon and Garfunkel's music. He actually begged, he pleaded with Clive not to release it as a single. Another thing is they also sped up his voice on the track. He didn't really care for that. It made his voice higher and, again, unrecognizable compared to his other stuff.
Why wait any longer for the one you love?
Clive Davis, who will go down as having 2 of the best years of the rock era, he eventually convinced Bob to release the track as a pre-album single to Nashville Skyline, Kicking and Screaming. And once again, Clive's ears didn't fail him. The listening audience loved it. Lay Lady Lay marked a turning point in Bob Dylan's illustrious career, showcasing a softer, more intimate side of his artistry, as I said before. His shifting songwriting approach and his vocal performance on the track tricked a lot of people because it was such a big departure, so much so that he only wanted it to be a deep cut on his album. It wasn't a raw anthem with scathing fire and venom. Instead, it was a tender, beautiful piece of music that was perfect for slow dance between romantic partners. A vision that one would never associate with Bob Dylan, and something that Bob didn't really want.
When he's standing in front of you.
His low-register croon made it sound like a completely different singer, and in a significant way, he was a different singer after that. When asked how he achieved the gentle, seductive delivery in Lay Lady Lay, Bob showed a wry side of his personality. He said, "I tell you, you stop smoking those cigarettes and you're able to sing like Caruso." And of course, referring to the legendary Italian opera tenor, Caruso, who in 1902 was one of the first vocalists ever to be commercially recorded. One of the greatest singer-songwriters referencing one of the greatest vocalists of all time. Pretty classic. Dylan's Nashville Skyline was the ultimate curveball in terms of Dylan reintroducing his sound to the world. I'm going to leave the last word to Huey Lewis, who mentioned this in a funny story about Bob Dylan when they were recording We Are the World together.
We're taking a break, and Willie Nelson comes up and says, "I hear you're playing golf." I said, "Yeah, man, I hear you do." He says, "Yeah, what do you do?" "We put our clubs on the bus." I said, "That's what we do too, man. It kills time. It's great." He says, "I know, it's great." And we're doing this, and Bob sees that and comes over and goes, "Are you guys talking about golf?" Incredulously. And we said, "Yeah." He says, "You play golf on the road?" I said, "Yeah." He said, and Bob, I'll never forget, he goes, "Man," he says, "that's outrageous." I said, "No, Bob. Nashville Skyline was outrageous." This is just golf.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, well, that was a thrill. And he wrote me a little note, a wonderful little note about how he likes sports and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, you know, that just blew my mind.
Probably a pinch me moment for you. Wow.
Oh, man.
I'm so excited about the new Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown, coming out. In fact, I think it's already out. And I hear that Timothée Chalamet gave an Oscar-winning performance. Even Dylan is very proud of the film. Leave us a comment about Lay Lady Lay. Let us know your memories of the song. What do you think about Dylan's new style? What do you think about Nashville Skyline? Let's have a great discussion below. Remember to vote at ProfessorRock.com for the best band. And make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.